was 11 years old. I used to go taking horses at the blacksmith shop, holiday times and Saturdays for a bit of pocket money. And then when I left school, I progressed on to be a second horseman under my uncle. And then I started doing a bit of blacksmithing with my uncle. And we used to break the horses in as 3-year-olds and do all sorts of things, muck cart, ploughing. We used to have 3 horses on a plough, single line. When we used to break the youngsters in, we always put 3 at length, the youngster in the middle between 2 older ones, and we used to have them 2 or 3 days in length, and then we used to put them in the furrow, on the side in the furrow, and then they'd eventually get so you drive them on the front of a cart, and then they'd go in the shafts and be like an ordinary old working horse. And we used to do all manner of things with them. I mean, we used to take stuff into Ely station, celery, potatoes, and when I was at boy at school, I remember 22 horse and carts going along the Stuntney road to Ely station, and that was how all our produce from the farm got to where it should be, because there was no lorries and that then. And like I say, I've been with horses, it will be 50 years in another 8 months' time. So I know a bit of ins and out of them. And some of the old horse keepers, they had some rum old ways. If you had a horse that used to bite, they used to put a rat trap under its nose, clamp a rat trap on it, or get a red hot tater, and so that used to bite that. And we had an old fella down at Soham and Fens, a chap named Butcher, and he could make horses lay down, and he could take bridles off horses when they was hooked on an implement, and they'd just stand there. And they reckon one day they was carting stuff from our farm at Soham and Fens up to Padnell, and every day they used to stop at the pub on the way home, and this chap who was with them, he didn't want to stop, so he used to go straight home. And they said, "Oh, Jack Butcher said he'll stop tomorrow," and they reckon when they got near the pub the horses stopped, they wouldn't move, and he had to stop with them. And the old foreman down there, who was Jack Moulton, old Jack Butcher was having his donkey one day, and Jack Moulton went there. He was on a binder, he had 3 horses on a binder, and he said to Jack Butcher, Jack Moulton did, he said, "I'll have a round for you, Jack, while you have your donkey." He said, "Righto." So Jack Moulton got on the binder seat, horses wouldn't move. So he said, "What's the matter with them, Jack?" He said, "Nothing." He said, "They'll move when I want them to." And they used to do that. And they reckon, I heard my father tell me that old Jack Butcher, he stuck a muck fork in a muck heap. He hooked 3 horses on it, and them 3 horses wouldn't pull that fork out of that muck heap. And he finished up, I think he finished up in foreman, because they had what they call the devil. And I heard my father say that there used to be a bridge over the River Lark, and he used to go up the pub and get drunk, and he used to stand on that bridge and swear at the devil. And he finished up in foreman, because they say you either, if you go through that ceremony with this here toad business in the ant hill and all the rest of it, if you don't, you either end up in foreman or you end up a priest. We had an old chap used to work horses at Stuntney, a bloke named Herbert Jip. He tried it, but he didn't go through with it. And we was muck cart one day up in what we call Stuntney Yard, which used to be a cow yard then, and he was filling muck, and he dropped down on his knees and he said, "The bugger's got me." And they reckon he went blind. He went blind for a second or two, but he got so frightened of horses after that, he had to leave them. He just got terrified of them. and that was because he didn't do the whole business. He reckoned that the devil had got him. Yeah. So some rum old things, you know, years ago. And my Uncle Charlie, that was my mother's brother. He used to live just up the road, you know, where you come from, where you walk from. He used to live there. And when I was a boy, I used to go up there and go up there with him, because he used to be horsekeeper down what we call Thorney Farm. And I used to go up there some nights, and he'd be cooking all these old potions up in the saucepan, and he used to put it in bottles, and he used to have to tie the corks in, because that'd blow the corks out. And my poor old aunt, she used to say to him, "You'll blow the bloody house up before you're done." But he used to feed that to his horses, and they reckon the mangers of them used to look so they'd been scrubbed out. And his horses, they always had a short, shiny coat all winter. They never ever had what we call a winter coat. They always looked so they'd got summer coats. But what the hell he used to give them, I don't know. I often wish now I'd have asked him, but he got suffocated in the chaff house down at Thorney. He ended up getting killed down there. Yeah. An old chap, another chap we had on the farm, a bloke named Dave Turner. He was an old horse keeper, and he had a horse once, and somebody said to him, "You'll never drive up the single line, David." He said, "I will." And they reckon he tied a bit of cotton round his tongue and drove it with a bit of cotton tied around his tongue. What the hell that done, I don't know. But if they had one that used to shake his head, they used to tie a bit of cotton between his ears. They reckon with the wind blowing through the cotton, that used to stop them shaking their heads. Yeah. But I had some mishaps with horses when I worked, and I always remember I had a little mare named Snip, and that's the mare looking over that gate up there, that photograph up there, and I broke her in as a 3-year-old and got her so she drove in the line and everything. And we had an old fella, his name was Harry Venny, and he said to me one day, he said, "Can I have her to go fencing?" Because he was what we call he used to go around doing the fencing, the fields and that. And I said, "Yeah." And he was going up this road with her, and the lorry's brakes failed and hit the back of the cart. She tipped him out of the cart and run home. I took her a few weeks after that on what we call a wheat horso. Well, when you had a wheat horso, you never had breechings on the horse. You just had bridle, collar, and saddle. Well, I was going down a hill at Thorney, what we call our Thorney farm. This horso run forward, because that hit her in the back of the heels. She bolted. I hung on her. I tripped over in a cart rut, fell down on the floor, and as she come round, they'd been cutting spits, and they'd got all the brush in a heap. I shouted "whoa," and she stopped. If she hadn't have stopped, I wouldn't have been here today, I don't think, because the horse shears used to clear the ground by about that much. And if she'd have come right round and went back up that hill, she'd have dragged me up there. And then one day we was trimming youngsters up the yards up the road, and they was Persianshire crosses they were, and one of them buggers reared up and hit me on top of the head, put 8 stitches on top of his head. That's how I actually come to get into farrowing more, because after he got hit, I used to go and sort of help him, but I never ever nailed the shoes and that on. I used to sort of hold the feet and that up for him, and then when he got hit on the head with this colt, he had 8 stitches on the top of his head, and when he used to bend down, he used to go dizzy. So he started to learn me then to nail the shoes on, and that's when I first started actually nailing the shoes on. Because I never went to college like the lads do nowadays. I mean, I've got a son who's a farrier. That's give me that photograph up there. My son, he took up farrowing. He's the only generation there what will take it up in the family, because all the Beans family where I originated from, they was all farriers, and he's self-employed farrier now. He done his apprenticeship with Gowns at Soham, and he's been a farrier now for 12 years, I think, full time. He done his 4-year apprenticeship at the college at Hereford, so he's sort of taken the job on, like, and he's the only one who took farrowing up. This other photograph here was where I went and received my 40 years. I got a medal for 40 years from the Shire Horse Society. I've got the medal up there, if you look to see it. My son who's a farrier now, when he was a lad, he used to come with me, sort of doing a bit of shoeing, and people used to say to him, "Are you going to take the job on, when you leave school?" And he said, "No, I bloody well ain't." He said, I ain't have nothing to do with horses." Well, then he come home from school one day, and he said they wanted him to go on work experience. So he said, "Well, I don't know where to go." He said, "Because they don't want you to go on a farm, because they said the old farmer will put you out in the middle of a beet field and you won't learn nothing." So I said to him, "Why don't you go and see Richard Gowan at Soham, at the Red Line Forge at Soham, and see if you can go over there and learn about welding and that." Anyhow, he went over there, and because Richard had got a son, Stephen, and he went out with Stephen shoeing, and then he said to him, "Can I have an apprenticeship here when I leave school?" And that's how he come to start off into farrieing. And then he sort of went to Hereford College and done some training there, and then he passed his diplomas, and because he's a sort of qualified farrier now, which he's been doing now for about 12 years. He's based at Soham. He's a self-employed. He's a mobile, what they call a mobile farrier. He hasn't got a forge. He does, works at the back of his van. He's got a gas forge, and he's not got a permanent forge. He's got a gas forge in the back of his van, and they like travel around, go to the horses rather than the horses going to them. See, when we had a forge on the farm, that was up in the village, the horses used to come to the forge to be shod. The only time the farrier went to the horses was when we used to go to trim the youngsters in the yards before they went out in the springtime. We used to go and trim the feet before they went out. But normally, if they to be shod, they used to come into the blacksmith shop up in the village. Now, when I left school at 15, I started on the farm. They used to farm 3,000 acres with just horses. When I started, there was 100 men and 200 horses, and they used to break the horses in at 3-year-old. Well, they first started breaking them in at 2-year-old, and then they used to give them a half a day each. They'd like have one up till dinner, take that back and bring another one out after dinner, and they used to get turned away for the summer. Then they come back as 3-year-olds, and then they was broke in more sort of permanent. And to start them off, they mostly used to get driven on the front of a cart, and before they was ever put in the shafts. And then they was taught to be driven by a single line, which was done by starting off. We used to start them off with 2 lines, and we used to, when you wanted them to turn right, which we used to call Orford, you'd slightly pull one line and slightly chuck the other one, and go and sort of go whoosh back. Then when you wanted to turn what we call left, which was towards you, towards we used to call it, you'd just pull the line. Well, after a few hours, I mean, you could train a horse, if a horse had got any sense at all, you could train him in about 2 to 3 hours to drive with a single line. And then once you got them with a single line, we very rarely ever used double lines then, and used to drive 3 horses on a single line, and the line wouldn't be no thicker than a good piece of cord really. And when you went to plough with a single line, we always used to have 3 horses at you'd have your horse in the middle with the line on it, with a single line, with a whip, what we used to call a whip line. Then you'd have your horse in the furrow and the horse what you used to call on the hang-by. So you had one on the left hand side of the horse and one on the right hand side. They was controlled, their leads were tied to the line horse's collar, and to keep them in place they had what we used to call a false line, which used to go on the bearing rein, and the false lines used to go back to the horse tree which the line horse was hooked to. So they couldn't go forward. If they start to go forward, well then the false lines pulled the bearing reins back, and that was how they was controlled. And when you hooked 3 horses together on a plough, you all started off, you had your big 3-horse pole, then on the end, because the 3-horse pole had a long end, the hook on the 3-horse pole wasn't in the middle. That was got sort of 2/3 one end and 1/3 the other end. Well, on the third end, you then hooked a double horse tree, then you hooked like 2 single horse trees, and then you had a single horse tree on the 2/3 end. So you had like 2 horses on the third end and 1 horse on the 2/3 end. But if you got the horse tree the wrong way round, you got 1 horse doing 2 horses work and 2 horses doing 1 horse's work. So if you had one which was a bit hasty and you wanted to bugger him up quick, you used to turn that horse tree over, give him the 2 horses work, give the 2 horses the 1 horse's work. And I'll tell you what, he didn't stick that long, because I always remember my cousin, he was I think he was rolling or something. Anyhow, he went to my uncle who was horsekeeper, and he said, "I can't make out what's the matter with these horses," he said. "I've got one sweating his guts out," he said, "and the other 2 ain't turned the hair." So when my uncle went and looked, he said, "No, you got the 3-horse tree the wrong way round. One poor bugger was pulling 2 horses work, and the other 2 was pulling 1. So he said, that's the problem. Well, you see, with the single line, I mean, I go to watch plough matches, and I'm always amazed how they drive with these double lines. I don't know how the hell they don't get them tangled up in the plough wheels, because they've got lines hanging everywhere. Well, with a single line, you know, you only needed 1 hand, and you'd got your other hand to operate your plough or whatever you was doing. So, boy, I had a word with Roger Clark one day, and he said to me, he said, "I'd like you to show me how to rig 3 horses up to drive a single line." But I never ever got over there to show him, because he said he'd like to, you know, to do it, but I never ever got over that. But one day I might do, if I live long enough. Yeah. All right. When we used to hook 3 horses to a plough with single line, you had your chain of your plough there, your head of your plough. Then you fixed what they call a 3-horse tree, which was 1/3 one end and 2/3 the other. Then to that, on one end, on the third end, you put what we used to call a double horse tree, and on the other end you put a single horse tree, and on the end of the double horse tree you then put 2 single horse trees. So 1 horse was connected to that horse tree, another horse was connected to that horse tree, and another horse was connected to that horse tree. While your single line, this horse here, his false line to control him was back to that horse tree. That is the what we used to call the hang by horse. The thorough horse's false line was connected to that horse tree. This horse in the middle was the one you drive with a single line, and then your single line come from the head of the horse here back to back of the plough where you was walking. So that's how they was. Then with this horse, the middle horse controlled the other two, and they was tied. They were sort of tied to the head of this one, or to the collar of this one, by their leads like that, and that's how they was tethered up. I got a three horse team set horse trees out over the farm one day, and I said to the young chap, "Can you fix them up to hook 3 horses on an implement?" And he ain't got a clue. He hooked them all hook to hook, so he had one long thing instead of. He ain't got a clue. So I don't know. I mean, they keep on about the oil running out, but if ever they went back to horses, I don't know where you're going to find the people to know how to work them anyway. So we've only got to hope that the oil never runs out. That is handed down from your great granddads, really, from your grandfathers and fathers. But the trouble is nowadays there's nobody sort of work horses anymore, so these things don't ever get handed down. We always played with 3 horses abreast, except after harvest we used to do what we used to call tilt the land. They used to sort of cut it about 2 to 3 inches deep, and then sort of to kill the top weeds, and then sort of after we'd finished, because then you'd sort of do you'd take your tater crop up and your beet crop, and then you'd start your winter ploughing. Well, then you would then deep plough the land which you'd already tilted, and so we used to have, when we used to tilt, we always had 2 horses on the plough, because you was only in about 2 or 3 inches, but when you deep ploughed you always had 3. Well, then some of the land what we used to use to grow potatoes, we then sort of March time, we would then what they call cross cut it. You'd plough it again across what you've already ploughed to get the land sort of more finer. But nowadays they don't cross cut land anymore. They run these here big old clods, what we call stone separators over them, and sift all the clods out. But so if we had 2 furrow ploughs, we never did use 2 furrow ploughs much. But if they had 2 furrow ploughs, they would sometimes put 4 horses on them. But that was very rarely they ever used them. I don't think I only ever see them use them once. And when we was potatoing, we always had what we used to call a spinner. And they used to have 3 horses on the spinner. And then you'd have either 1 horse in the carting the potatoes. You'd have like 2 1-horse carts. If it got heavy going, you'd have what we call a trace horse. Because I remember one harvest time I was about 14 years old, I think, and we had such a wet summer that we had 3 horses on a cart pulling corn off the land, and I was a boy still at school, but I was on my summer holidays, and I used to pull them off the land with the 3rd horse, and then I used to walk the 3rd horse back to pull the next cart off, and then they had binders on sledges. They were sledging the binders around because that was so wet. And somebody rang my old governor up and asked him if he could borrow some horses because he couldn't get his harvest up. And he politely told him, he said, if you want to get your bloody harvest up, he said, you'll have to do like me, you'll have to keep the horses. and that's what the old governor told him, because this chap had gone mechanised and his combine was stuck in the middle of the field, and he asked him if he could borrow some horses, and he politely told him if he wanted them he'd got to keep them. They had power binders driven by, you know, by tractors with power drives, and they used to put the wheels on a sledge and just sledge them around, because all our binders were what we used to use were ex-horse binders, and they was driven by a land wheel, and we always had two horses on a pole with one on the front, and you always had a boy rowing the front horse, because I remember my uncle telling me once we got a field what we call the 11 acres, which runs along the Newmarket railway line, and my uncle was a man. He loved to he could have a nap anywhere. He could hang on a washing line and go to sleep. And he said he was riding binder, and this lad was riding the front horse, and the reins got wrapped in the sails, and the train come, fripped these horses, and he said they had to pull the horses into the standing corn to stop them, because the reins were all wrapped around the bloody sails. And that took the reins out of his hand, and he said, like, he kept telling the old boy who was riding the front horse to pull them round in a circle in the standing corn, and that was the only way they could stop them. But and then when they converted them then to being like towed tractors, they cut the poles and put like a drawbar on the end, but when we had that wet year, because they wouldn't work, you see, they just skidded along. And my uncle, who was blacksmith, he was also, well, I suppose you'd call him the farm mechanic, because what he used to do, you'd probably be at the blacksmith shop with a horse to be shod, and he'd get a call binder broke down, so you used to have to stand there and hold the bloody horse while he went off on his bike. He never had a van or nothing. He used to have to put his tools in a bag, hop on his bike out to the binder. I mean, the most problem used to be the knotters, you know, what used to tie the knots, tie the shows, and he'd go out there and put that right, and then he'd bite back. And he was telling me in his younger days, because we always had three stables of horses, what we call Soham Fen. We had King's Farm, Bank Farm and Island Fen. If he went down there shoeing for a day, he used to have to take all his shoes and his tools on a bike, and bike down there, and be shoeing down there all day and then bike home at night. Never had no vans like they have nowadays. He said you had to go everywhere on a bike. Yeah. And he worked, my uncle, he worked with my grandfather for a start. That's where he learned, with my grandfather, blacksmithing. And when they worked on the co-op at Coleham, my uncle was telling me that my grandfather, there was a chap on there named Cally Green, and he used to lead a Shire stallion, and every time this stallion come to the forge, that used to hop my old grandfather over onto the wall of the forge. So my grandfather said to this chap Cally Green, he said, you watch out for yourself today, Cally. He said, because I'm going to stop that bugger doing that. He said, and he took the twitch off the wall, hung at the other side. This old horse started hopping him on the wall. He picked the twitch off the wall. He reckoned he hit this horse the back of the ear hole with this twitch, laid him out cold on the floor. Cally Green said, you killed him, Charlie. He said, well, that's the best bloody place for him. But he reckoned when he got up, he said that he never ever hopped him on that wall no more. And have you ever seen what we call a twitch? A length of shaft with a hole in the end with a bit of stringing, and he hit him back of the ear with that. And he said he never ever hopped him on that wall no more. But they reckon, I can only just remember my grandfather, but they reckon he had arms, the tops of his arms were like tops of some people's legs. He was a hell of a strong bloke. They reckon he could tip a horse on his back. A hell of a strong bloke, but he died, he had a heart attack and died. He was only about, I think he was about 64. He didn't live to be an old man, but he was a strong bloke, I reckon. I just remember him. I think I was about 4 when he died. I would just remember him at the blacksmith shop. Yeah. When we used to have mares foaling, we used to sit up with them, and we always used to let the mares, because they always run in a big crew yard, all run in there together. And when the mares foaled, we used to get the foal and put it in a barrow, and we'll lead the mare and wheel the foal down to what we used to call the foal boxes. And sometimes when you got down there with the foal and the mare, sometimes you'd have a hell of a job to make the mare see the foal. When you got down there, sometimes the mares wouldn't acknowledge the foals because they thought the foals were still in the yard. And sometimes we used to have a hell of a job to get them to take a foal. And then I remember once we and sometimes the afterbirths and that, when they never used to come away from the mares, we sometimes used to tie bricks on them to weight them down to make them pass them. And some of the old horse keepers, they used to throw the old afterbirths on top of the hedge, because they used to say that good luck for the birds to peck at it. And the milk out of the foal's mouth, very rarely you ever found that, but sometimes you did. And they used to say if you dried that and carried it around with you, horses would follow you about. Because some of the old horse keepers, we had an old fella named Tiger Fretwell, and he had a mare which, if anybody else worked her, she wouldn't pull a bloody hen off a nest. You put a load on her and she'd just lay down. Your old Tiger Fretwell, he'd work her and put as big a load on as anybody, and she'd pull it, and they couldn't make out why. And he told me the secret one day, that he got had some stuff mixed up, and one of the ingredients was scents of lemon, but I can't remember what the others were. And I went to the chemist once and tried to get it, but the old chemist didn't know what I was talking about. And he used to carry that in his handkerchief, and that old mare would follow him anywhere. But the problem was with them old drugs and that years ago, you asked a chemist today, and they don't know what you're talking about. I mean, I had an old recipe that was to calm a restive colt to be shod, and I ripped that out and took that to the chemist. But the bloke at the chemist, he said, I'll get everything bar two things. Well, without them two things, the rest of it weren't any good. But nowadays, I mean, they don't, you don't need them sort of drugs nowadays, because you get a problem horse there, you just ring the vet and they stick a needle in them and calm them that way. But years ago, there weren't none of that. And there used to be a drug used to grow in the hedgerow. We used to call it hot poker. And there was a male and female of this plant, and I forget which way round it was now, but if you got male or female, whichever one it were, one was deadly poison and the other one was I think they used to use it for horses' coats or something. But if you got the wrong one, you would end up killing the horse rather than making him better. But foaling was all right if everything went all right. I mean, we did have problems. We had a mare once, the foal was on her side, and we called the vet out, and the vet put eye hooks in his eyes, in the foal's eyes, and ropes on his feet, and there was three of us with a crowbar pried behind the post trying to pull this foal out. Anyhow, the foal was dead, but we eventually got it away. The next year, when the mare had a foal, she wouldn't only let one person in the box at a time. If I went in on my own, I was all right, but if anybody else come with me, she'd go bloody crazy. This foal, she had this colt foal, and that had the navel on it kept bleeding. So we had to ring the vet up, and the vet come out, and he said, well, we have to throw the foal on the floor, turn it on its back to do what he got to do. And my youngest brother was with me, and we tied the mare in the box. We turned the foal over, and I said to my brother, this mare she was smashing at the box with both front feet, and I said to him, if she gets off that rope, gets off that lead, I said, you get out that bloody door quick. I said, because you'll have us, and she would have done. I think that was because we pulled this foal away, she thought she was going to lose the other one. She never ever forgot, but like I say, if you went in there on your own, she was alright. But, you know, look, everywhere, if you had a foal, you always had spectators, or we want to come and see the foal. But you wouldn't go in there with her, not for at least a fortnight after she'd foal, because she would have you. Yeah, she would have. And I think that was the reason, because she lost her first foal, and she thought she was going to lose the others. If I sort of started with my uncle. I was second man to him, and I used to sit. We used to have half a night sitting up each. I used to sit up till midnight, and then because we used to check on them about every hour. Well, you used to go by the mare really. If you thought she'd be right for an hour, you'd come home and have an hour and then go back. But sometimes if I was a bit restless, you wouldn't leave them an hour. You'd probably leave them half an hour or a quarter of an hour. Because I always remember once over the yard, I was sitting up with the mare there, and she sort of started to sweat up, and then she cooled off. I thought, that bugger ain't going to fold it, so I thought I'll nip on and have a cup of coffee. So that's when we had them across the old yard. I nipped down here, made a cup of coffee, sit in, drunk it, went back, and she'd bloody fold. And she'd gone down near the stable door, and she'd pushed the foal out, but she'd pushed, because the foal couldn't go anywhere, because she was up against the door, she pushed the foal's body over top of his head, so the foal was actually laying on his own head. Time I got out, the bloody thing was dead. And I think I was away from there 20 minutes. See, some old mares won't foal if you stand there. If you stand there with them, you have to either hide up or get out the way or something. Because some of them, I remember one Saturday night, sit over there with a mare, and I think the last time I checked on her was about 6:30 in the morning, and the others were out in the field. I thought, and all she was interested was getting out the field. So I turned her out in the field, and I bet she hadn't been out there half an hour, and she foaled out in the field. She was waiting to get out with them others, I reckon. But after they used to foal, we always used to say, always give them about 8 hours before they cleanse. I think the vets nowadays, they say 4. But our old vet, old Tom Jackson from Ely, the vet we used to use, old Tom's still alive. He's 86 now, I think. And we used to leave him 8 hours, and then we'd ring him, he'd come and check him, he'd sort of shove his arm in, and he'd say, well, that's not ready yet, and he'd inject them, and then perhaps come back a couple of hours later. But the vets nowadays, I think they tend to rush it a bit. They sort of cleanse them, and I think a lot of the time they're not really ready, because we had a vet, was it last year, and he was pulling these afterbirths, and I thought to myself, I don't know, you're pulling them a bit hard. And then this sort of started to come out thick, and I sort of felt he was sort of pulling this afterbirth, and I sort of felt it. And I said to him, I said, if I didn't know any better, I said I would say there's another foal in there. he said, I think I'd better check. Well, what was happening? He was pulling a bloody womb out as well. She was prolapsing. Well, with that, she went down on the floor, and I thought, oh shit, just, she'll probably. Because I remember a few years ago we had one what did chuck his bed out, was chuck his womb and everything out, and that's a bloody mess when they do that. And I thought that's what she was going to do, but anyhow, she went down, and the vet went down with her and sort of kept his arm in and kept the womb in, but that was a near thing. I thought if she shuts that out, then we are in trouble. But the old vets years ago, we wouldn't even think about calling the vet till after about 8 hours. And what I always do, which my uncle and the old horse keepers who I worked with used to do years ago, after they foaled, I always tied the afterbirth in a knot, tied 4 or 5 knots in them, so you get the weight, and the weight will sort of pull the afterbirth out. But like I said a little while ago, I know some of the old horses used to tie bricks on them to weight them down to see if they could. But nowadays they seem to. They say they. I have run vets and I say, look, that's been foaled. Because the trouble is nowadays you can't get a vet. It's like going to bloody doctors now, really, to get a vet. You ring a vet up, you might get him 3 hours late, you might not, so you have to ring them soon enough. But then, if they come straight away, probably the mares are not ready anyway, and I think they tend to force them a bit. But we have, we don't get very little trouble really, not foaling. I think I've only ever lost about 2, I think, in I've been looking after them now. I've been in full charge of them now for 30 years, I suppose. I've lost about 2 through foaling. One of them was one laid on the side, and the other one she foaled like so, and I don't let her go by. Yeah, you get the new market people. They have what we call foal sitters. They employ somebody to sit there all the time with them. But when we used to work on the farm, we used to sit up. Me and my uncle who was horse keeping, I was the second man then. We used to sit up like a half a night each. But the problem was you had to go to work next day, so you had to get a little bit of sleep. But the problem was, what I could never make out is they used to want you to sit up with the mare foaling at nights, but the mare would probably be there all day on its own because you'd be out on the farm at work. So if she foaled in the daytime, she would be foaling on her own, which is all right, providing everything goes all right. But you only need a mishap like a leg back or head back, or it's not laying right, and then because then you've got problems then, because the mare then can't get rid of it. I remember once a few years ago I had a mare across the road in an orchard, and I checked on her at 11:15, and this was during the day, and she was fine. I checked on her again at 11:15, and she'd started to foal, but nothing was happening. So anyhow, I called the vet out, and that got a leg back, and the vet towed it out with his car, put ropes on it, and backed his car up. Well, it was a woman vet, and she backed the car up, and she towed it with the car, put the ropes on the tow bar. And Tom Jackson was telling me, Tom Jackson, the vet from Ely, he went out to a mare, and the foal had been dead in the mare for 3 days, and the chap's name was Sonny Driver, owned a mare, and he phoned him up and he said, "Mare starting to foal." He said, "I thought she was going to foal 3 days ago." He said, "And nothing's happened." So Tom said, "I went out and she had started to foal, but the foal laid wrong." And he said he towed it out with his Land Rover, and he said, and the mare just went off eating as if nothing had happened. But normally, with the afterbirths, if with a more so with a heavy horse, like a Shire or a Persian or one of the heavier breeds, you don't like them afterbirths in the morning about 8 hours, because then you get septicemia and then you end up with fever in the feet. And you know, we had one year. She cleansed, but a bit broke off, because when after they're what we call cleansed, I always lay the afterbirths out, lamb out, because if you lay the afterbirth out, that is actually the shape of the foal. But there's always a bit, what we call the tail bit on the end, and that sometimes breaks off, and that is the bit which you have to make sure is still intact, because that is the bit which sometimes will break off and bit left in the mare, and then because you end up with bloody fever in the feet. Well, they used to call it fever in the feet, but nowadays they call it laminitis. Well, I mean, years ago they used to call it fever in the feet, but that's the same sort of thing as laminitis, really. And so that is essential, really, that you lay them out to make sure, you know, everything is there, because you don't need a very big bit left in to cause problems. More so with heavy mares, because my son, he was doing a bit of foal sitting for a woman, and this mare, this stud where he was foal sitting at, had lost a mare, so they wanted a foster mare, and they got a foster mare from down Wales, which had lost a foal, and they brought this mare up, and this mare was nasty to the foal, so she had to have somebody with her all the time. And my son said to this woman, he said, because he knows a bit about foaling, because he used to come with me, you see, that's my son who got there in that photograph there with them Persians, and he said to this woman, he said, "That mare lays down a lot." She said, "Well, yeah," she said, "that lays down," she said, "because I reckon it's tired." He said, "Well, it lays down as if it's fallen." So anyhow, they got the vet out, and she hadn't cleansed properly. She'd got a bit left in, and he said to this vet, this young vet what come, this young woman vet, my son did, he said, "That's a wonder, you know, she ain't got sort of fever in the feet now." And she said, if that had been a heavy horse, it would have had. But because that was like a thoroughbred thing, they reckon they're a bit more tolerant with afterbirth left in what the old heavy ones are. But you know, we all say about 8 hours, but I have known them to go all day, but with antibiotics. You know, if you inject them with antibiotics, then you're fairly well covered. But I mean, we used to say no more than 12 hours, but 8 is normally the norm about 8 hours. I mean, that's like foals. A lot of people, as soon as the foal's born, they start pumping milk into it. Now, I don't believe in that. Well, I mean, we never did. I always leave a foal for a few hours, because the problem is, once you start artificial feeding them, then you're causing problems, because they associate you with the mother, then they won't suck the mare. I mean, the young vets nowadays, when they come out, the first thing they ask you, is it sucked yet? And if you say no, the first thing they do is shove a bloody pipe down it and milk the mare and start pumping milk down it. Well, then the foal gets so he thinks you're his mother, so he won't suck the mare. I mean, I went to a woman's one day to do some shoeing, and she'd got a mare foaled, And I stood looking at it over the door, and it was sucking the mare. This woman come out, and she'd got 4 babies' bottles in her pocket with milk in. I said, what the hell you got them bottles of milk for? She said, oh, she said, that bloody foal won't suck. I said, that's suck. I said, that's been sucking. I said, I've been standing here watching it. She said, oh, well, I'll give it this milk, she said, and then I'll leave it. I said, all you're doing, you're causing yourself bloody problems. Because the foal used to go at the mare, and because she'd pull the bloody foal away and stick a bottle of milk down it. Well, then they get so they won't suck the mare then. I mean, I don't believe in messing them about too much. Or sometimes if, because I mean, I always say if they won't suck, there's something wrong with them, because that's nature for them to suck. But sometimes you'll get a foal and you'll be messing about round the mare's bag, and if you sometimes get the other side and just sort of tease it, you can sometimes, you know, sort of tease it onto the tip. But if you start forcing them, you know, then you're only making problems for yourself. And the trouble is, that is a problem nowadays. They can't wait, you know what I mean? They think, oh, as soon as that foal's born, that's got to have milk. But I don't think that's right. I always give them a chance and let nature take its course as much as possible. I mean, that's like mares. That's like mares when they don't come in season and that. I mean, nowadays they pump them full of bloody drugs and whatnot. But I always say, if a mare doesn't come in season, there's a reason for it. I mean, we had mares here. We had 4 mares here once, and then bloody things, they wouldn't come in season. I mean, we had them injected and all manner of things, and they wouldn't come in season. Anyhow, we sold them to a horse dealer, a bloke named King from Littleport. He sold 2 on them. He took 2 Appleby, 2 of these Shire mares, and sold them. Some bloke up Bristol bought them, and he turned them out with an old coloured stallion, and he got them both in season. But how we do it nowadays, I mean, we always used to have the stallion, we used to have a whole, I mean, years ago they had their own stallion. I mean, we used to have 2 stallions on the farm. But then, when they got then, the Wisbech Horse Society then started up, and they used to hire a stallion, they used to travel it. And this, they used to travel, they used to come every Friday. But here we do it now, we take the horses to Jeff Robertson's at Upton near Newark. We take them up there, which I took 3 last Friday, and we leave them there. They now scan them to see when the follicle is sort of big enough, and then a lot of it now is artificial insemination. Because when we went up last Friday, Jeff's daughter was telling me that the stallion they got now has never ever served a mare. They do it artificially. They got this artificial bloody horse, what they think, and he and what they do. Because I said to her, well, how the hell do you get a stallion to cover a wooden horse? She said, well, what we do, we get a mare which is in season. We let her wee on a sack, and then we lay the sack on this artificial horse, which makes the horse, this wooden horse, smells like it's in season, and then the stallion will serve the artificial horse. But how the hell they catch the seed? They must have some sort of container to catch the seed in, I'd have thought, because there was nothing on the. I mean, there was only like a bloody log of wood on 4 legs, really. That looks like it was a big old log put on. They looked like they built like 4 brick pillars with this big old log on, with it got like a leather, some sort of leather covering on it, and that's all it was. And I said to her, you know, you wouldn't think that a horse would cover it, but she said, but that's how we get it to cover it. She said, we get a mare in season to sort of make water on this sack, and then lay the sack on the neck, because that thinks there's a bloody mare in season. But we used to have an old fella come years ago, his name was Bert. He always used to lodge my aunt and uncle, and he always had a little old case that was about a foot by 6 inches, I think, and that was full of little bottles of stuff. And every time when he travelled a stallion around the farm, he used to bring in, we used to have what we used to call a stallion box up the yard, up Ben's yard, and he'd put him in there, and he'd go up this little case, and he'd get a sixpence, and he'd go to these bottles, and he'd get a little, he used to sort of, this sixpence was his measuring. However much sixpence was shown was how much stuff he got. And he'd get a little bit out of this bottle and a little bit out of that bottle and put in the horse's feed. We said to him one day, because he never locked this thing up, and we said, "Ain't you frightened somebody? Pinch that Bert." He said, "If they pinch that, mate," he said, "and they don't know what's in there," he said, "I shall know who's got it." He said, "because they'll have a few dead horses." But every day, every time that horse had been serving mares, he'd take it up in that stable. The old stallion would drop his tool out, and he'd wash it in a pail of water, and then he'd give that stallion the water to drink. Why he done that, I don't know, but I've seen him do that several times.